Right. Let's move on to the next one on the list, Jack. And that is, this is again from normally an owner, entrepreneur, operator of the company who says, I can't get my sales team to sell like me. And what they mean by this often when they're having this conversation with me is, you know, part of the reason they think they're stuck in the sales seat is because they've never been able to get salespeople to build pipeline or convert pipeline the way that they do. And that creates a limiting belief that nobody can do it as good as me. My salespeople can't do it like me. And that's then what's holding them back from leaning in and building this replicability and scalability that we've been talking about. So what are your thoughts on this kind of a limiting, this fixed mindset, you should say, of somebody that says, I can't get my sales team to sell like me?
So I'm going to take you back way in time. And I actually was, graduated with an accounting degree, bachelor's in accounting, and was a CPA working at Arthur Andersen, and spent a little bit of time wearing the hat of the CFO of a national sized company. And the CEO of the company came to me and said, you're a natural to be running the entire place instead of me. But you've got a few gaps in your capabilities that can be fixed, but I need you to kind of come over here and do some of this stuff. And I'm going, John, it's just not possible to run enough hours in the day. I've got to close the books every month. I've got to produce financial statements. I've got to do the analysis. And he said, look, let me suggest this. I'll give you an extra 2 weeks vacation. You and Bonnie go to Europe. Yeah, the only proviso that I give you is that you can't get in touch with us in any way. No phone calls, no back and forth in any way. This is pre-internet, so no, that we didn't have to talk about emails or any of that. And he said, and the 2 weeks have to be back to back, and they have to be the last week of the month and the first week of the month. And the last week of the month is when you close the books. The first week is when you produce financials. And he said, when you come back, you're going to find that the work got done by your team. And then for the next 3 months, for those 2 weeks, again, for 3 more months, you're going to work inside the company, shoring up the areas that you're not strong on and knowledgeable about, so that I can eventually give you the keys to the place. Well, what I can tell you is when I came back, the books were closed and the financial statements were produced, and I might have done it a little bit different, and I might have done it a little bit better, but it passed all the muster internally and externally to our auditors, etc. And here's the best part of this story for me. I've never, ever done the books or the financial statements again in my life. And my accountant on my current business is frustrated with me because he produces these financial statements and I have no interest in even looking at them. Where I used to think that only I could do this, right? And, you know, within 6 months of that story, I was the CEO of this national company. And so, you know, I was blessed with John as the CEO who took it upon himself to say, hey, Jack isn't going to get out of his own way if I don't make it really easy for him to do that. And I think that's the issue is, look, that your additional salespeople, in my opinion, don't need to sell like you. What you should do is have people coming in and following best practices, which you and I know we anchor in something called a sales playbook. And the sales playbook is a compendium of the best practices from a salesperson standpoint, irrespective of who they're coming from. In other words, I wouldn't in this instance build the sales playbook based on me. I would build it based on we, right? And pick and choose from, and then have everybody following the playbook.
I love that.
Your take.
It's a big topic. And the playbook is a definitely a natural part that when we can talk just about that and how you need to playbook your best practices and how you need to role practice that. I mean, that for me is the key to unlocking this thing is oftentimes role practice, right? We don't role practice enough. We don't anchor what we know enough. But I think I'm going to go in a different direction. And I'm going to say, in addition to role practice, playbook, all that kind of stuff, I want to highlight two other things that I think are key in getting your salespeople to sell like you. The number one thing that I see that people miss is not enough entrepreneurs are sharing their vision enthusiastically and frequently within the business. When I speak to groups of people, I'm sure that's the same for you, Jack, oftentimes key executive groups, CEO groups, none of them might have the title of Chief Revenue Officer or VP Sales, but if I put any one of them into a sales call, that call will go well, even though they might be a self-professed non-salesperson. And the reason it goes well is because they have a gravitas and an authority, a credibility that is tangible, that you can smell, and that's hard to replicate. And oftentimes that gravitas comes from their absolute conviction in the vision, the mission, and the purpose of that business. And what I need entrepreneurs, CEOs, C-suite executives to do is I need them to beat the vision drum. I often say, if you beat the vision drum, your tribe will come. You will attract the team members that believe what you believe. You will attract the clients that believe what you believe. But more importantly, your vision becomes like fairy dust that sticks to your salespeople. So now when they go out into the world, they don't do what we call show up and throw up. They're actually talking from a place where they believe the mission and the vision of that company. And now they start to smell like you, right? In a metaphorical sense. They have that conviction, that gravitas. They feel like a subject matter expert. So it changes everything about them as opposed to just changing the words that come out of their mouth. That's the first thing. The second thing that I think is missing is empowerment, right? I often say, well, why is it that so often if I go out as a salesperson and I go see a prospect called John, let's say it's a prospect called Mary. I go see Mary and I sit in front of Mary and I do my thing. And she goes, you know what, Monet, I think I want to buy, but I'd like you to just change the payment terms for me slightly. Maybe just despec that thing for me. Let's talk about when you're going to deliver it. And I say, you know what, Mary, that sounds very reasonable to me. Let me go check with my boss, Jack, if that's doable, and I'll come back to you tomorrow. But if I was in that meeting and Jack was sitting next to me and Mary was saying, could you just change this, that, or whatever, Jack would look at Mary and go, I think that's fine. Let's do the deal. Let's sign the paperwork right now. Why does it require Jack to be in the room with me? Because we lack empowerment with our salespeople. We don't want to pay the school fees. We don't want the risk of them making mistakes. And then we end up with this disempowered, anemic sales team that has neither mastery nor autonomy in their roles. So for me, it starts with vision, 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 so that we smell and look and feel different. And then it's about paying the school fees and making sure that these salespeople can make value-based decisions.
I love the combo that you just did. And on the empowerment, just from a tangible standpoint, what I can tell you is that I spent 3 out of every 4 weeks when I had my companies out with my salespeople, visiting with clients and prospects on the road, and doing it anytime, as I was the owner, anytime we were there and people were asking about some exception or some little bit, I just found like it was just a no-brainer to just say yes, right? And after a while of doing that, I came back and I declared empowerment as being creating an environment in my business where people who worked in it felt comfortable making decisions as if they were the owner. And I talked about it all the time.
Yeah.
Whatever you think Jack would make a decision, make that decision. And by the way, sometimes people gave away more than what I would have, and they shouldn't have done it. And it's not a cause for me to spank them, but pat them on the back and say, okay, well, let me just educate you on some boundaries. And so that's a learning opportunity, not a scolding opportunity. And when you just a moment ago talked about vision, you made it very real for me the way you talked about it, as opposed to so often it's in the front page of some marketing literature and on the wall at the reception area, and then it dies. Your articulation of vision was something very different, and it became behaviorally real.
Yeah. And I think that's actually a very good point, behaviorally real. So I often get people coming to me and saying, okay, I buy this thing that you talk about vision, but how do I do it? Do I just every week in the sales meeting say, this is the vision? I'm like, no, because after 2 tries, people are going to get bored of that. How about you cascade that message, right? First week, this is the vision. Here's the why. Second week, here are the behaviors that I'd like to see, that if you demonstrate them with consistency, that signals to me that you are attached to this vision. How about in week 3, you start telling some success stories, right? Tell us your origin story. Tell us how you started this company. Tell us about some of the failures you've had. And you have this like cascading thing that you do, but it all starts with a vision, right? And what you're doing is you're changing what I call the oxygen richness of the environment. You're telling success stories, you're doing lessons learned, you're doing behavioral patterns, but it all comes back to the vision. And if you do that alone, it's going to change the sentiment and the morale of the company, which I think will help your salespeople to quote unquote sell more like you, because you're turning them into you, right? I think we've got time for one more, Jack, and then we're going to have to call this a day, and we'll go again as soon as we can get together. So here's a fun one. How do I know if I have the right salespeople in the right seats? So we talk a lot about attitude versus aptitude. You have a beautiful saying that I'm trying to recall verbatim, so I'm hoping I'm not going to butcher it. You hire for attitude, right? Hire for attitude, and you manage for skill. So I want you to talk a little bit about there seems to be a real fear, a real scarcity mindset when it comes to building sales teams. And I think I shared with you actually earlier today that there's some data out there now which suggests that in North America, so the US and Canada, the failure rate in sales recruitment in the US is 77%. I mean, that's not great odds. That's like Vegas odds, right? So 77% failure rate. And I can understand that off the back of that, a lot of people are scared to maybe let salespeople go that they have, even if they're C players or D players. How do you think people can get more confidence that either they're hiring and or they have the right people in the right seats?
So the expression recruit for skills, hire for attitude. Yeah.
That's what it is.
But here's a much more condensed version. Will over skill. And unfortunately, so much of the hiring process and the recruiting process is skill-based rather than will-based. 50% or more of success in selling has nothing to do with product, price, service, strategies, tactics, playbooks, blah, blah, blah. It has to do with grit and getting up and being hungry and going after it, right? You can teach people all of those other things, but are you hiring the person with the right grit, with that magic piece, that hunger piece, that tenacity piece? That's where I start. So here's what I think makes up that 78% fail rate. Too many people, when going after salespeople, are going after it based on a job description. So HR, love them to death. I mean, they've got an important role in the company. I don't want to be throwing them under the bus, but they're very insistent on every position in the company before they get hired. We need this job description. It's typically 3 to 5 pages. It's in this format. And we think when we got that done, we're done. And all I want, like a salesperson's job description, I would frustrate an HR person because I'd give them like win new customers, grow the ones you have, differentiate yourself from the competition. There's your job description. Fill in your blanks on the 5 pages. That's all. Win new customers, grow the ones you have. So what I think really what we need is you need the profile. You need the position profile. What are the attributes? What are the characteristics that makes a top performing salesperson? Because if you hire to that characteristics, if you hire to those pieces, assessing whether you've got somebody real or not is going to become very apparent. I say to people, I could tell you whether I've hired one that's a winner or not in the first 2 days. And I might even go into the first day. But it's certainly not going to take me more than a week to determine whether I've got a player or not. And I consider myself a player. So if I think about the number of times that over my career I did Vistage presentations all over the world. A little game that I had within myself was whenever I showed up in this place that was a different country, a different state, a different city, I don't know the geography, I don't know the traffic patterns, but more than 80% of the time, I was at the meeting location before the chair running the meeting, and
Yeah.
most likely before any of the members.
Mm.
Well, that's not in the textbook. It's not in the job description. It's not done, but it speaks to a whole heck of a lot. If I have a salesperson that opens the place up in the morning and closes in the evening and gets
Mm.
somebody to go out and get them a sandwich during the lunch hour, as opposed to the opposites, those are good signals for me.
Mm.
Those
Mm.
are things that I don't necessarily know how to teach, but I know how to find out in the interview whether this is what the person walks like. I'm going
Yeah.
to pass it back to you.
Well, you know what, Jack, what I love about the way that you answer these questions and is how you can simplify it because I often say complexity is the enemy of execution. And I think one of the themes that people will find in these discussions that you and I have is we are trying to make this simple because we want you to take action. We want you to take one thing and just run with it, as opposed to us lecturing to you for, hours on end. So I love the idea that you can, if you really are so inclined, you can tell early on whether somebody is the right person because it is about grit and mindset and attitude. I think that we have an unhealthy preoccupation with what we think the skills of a person is and what their previous performance is. Past performance is not a predictor of future performance, right? It just isn't. And what I'd like people to understand is that what we're hiring for, if you look at top grading as an example, we're hiring for B players, right? B players means high alignment to my culture, even if the competence isn't quite there yet. Simon Sinek, who I know you worked with and know very well, and who wrote the forward to one of your last books, Simon talks about working with the Navy SEALs, and he says when they recruit, they look for medium ability, but high trust. Why? Because I can't teach you to be trustworthy. I can't teach you to take a bullet for me, but I can teach you how to shoot straight. So what we're looking for are people in the first instance that have got the right attitude. And I think this is often where I give feedback to companies, and it's really, really unpopular because it's not what they want to hear. And what I say is, you need to get real for a second about who are your A players, your B players, your C players, and your D players, right? A's and B's I can work with. An A player is a great team player and they're competent. We can move mountains. B players, they're not quite as good as you want them to be, but a great attitude, great team player. I can train them, coach them, mentor them to be better. The majority of companies end up with C players in these roles. And they try and convince themselves that C players are worth having because C players are highly competent, but their attitude sucks. And the problem with that is if you have somebody that is competent, they're making you money, you don't want to talk about letting them go. But they're the people where if you say, hey, I just heard this funny name South African speak at my Vistage, maybe we should role practice. They go, role practice? Role practice is for rookies. Role practice, I've been doing this 10 years. I know what I'm doing. Okay, well, how about this? Help me build a playbook. What? A playbook? Are you joking? What, do you want some kind of a robot army? I've got my own style. These are the people where they're not replicable. They're not scalable, right? But you don't want to let them go because they're making you money. The problem is the longer you tolerate people with that attitude, the less likely you're going to be to get A players because an A player can make money anywhere. An A player will select you like you select them. So if you get an A player to come for an interview and they say, okay, I'm just about ready to join your company, Jack. Let me just talk to some of the other salespeople. And then they hear things like, we don't fill in the CRM. We don't do role practice. Mate, we play golf twice a week. They leave us alone. Then I'm going to back away slowly and be like, you know what? Thanks, but no thanks. Because I've worked hard to be elite and I want to stay elite. And I want to join an environment where being elite is the norm. And this does not sound like that kind of environment. So there are obviously, if you want to really go into the details, there's amazing tools that you can use. You can access some of that through Immerse, where we can do assessments of your existing people. We can help you assess candidates that you want to hire. We can look at their sales core competencies. We can look at their cultural alignment. All of those tools are available now. And you should absolutely have that as part of your recruitment process. But as Jack said, first and foremost, what is their attitude like?
Hey,
What kind of a team player are
one
they going to
last
be?
thing, and then I've got to go. But you know, I'm a voracious reader, and this is the book I would recommend if you want to know what you want to look for in the hire. Winning.
Gotcha.
Winning, written by Tim Grover. And then and so the attributes of what it takes to be at the top of your game. And when every time that I read the book, I got real clarity about the people I want to hang with and the people I'd like to have selling for me.
Beautiful. Jack, thank you for that. I know you've got another call coming up. Really appreciate your time and your valuable input. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Okay, see ya.